Well, to explain, we're joined by our favourite psephologist, Professor John Curtis from Glasgow. Always, John, welcome on The Daily Politics. So is it no longer about left and right in politics?
It is still about left and right, but the crucial thing is that in the wake of the election in June, it is no longer just about left and right, because the truth is, despite the creative ambiguity in which both parties engaged during the election campaign, and frankly, if it's continued to engage thereafter on the question of Brexit, voters themselves seem to have decided that A, Brexit still mattered, and B, they reflected their views about Brexit in the way in which they voted. So the Conservative Party, for example, quite clearly lost ground amongst those who voted Remain, who want a soft Brexit, who are not too concerned about immigration, whereas they gained ground amongst Leavers and those who wanted a hard Brexit. Labour, meanwhile, yes, they gained some ground amongst Leavers, amongst hard Brexiteers, but they gained much more amongst Remainers and soft Brexiteers and those not concerned about immigration. Now, attitudes towards Brexit certainly isn't a left-right issue. If you actually go back to what happened in the election, in the referendum in June 2016, whether or not you are left-wing or right-wing made virtually no difference at all to your chances of voting Remain or Leave. Rather, that referendum, with immigration the central issue, was where instead the crucial division was between social liberals and social conservatives, by which broadly we mean those people who, on the one hand, the social liberals who are quite happy with a relatively diverse society where we have multiple languages, multiple religions, and people don't necessarily all agree on the social mores to which we should adhere. In contrast, social conservatives think we need a much more cohesive society, and therefore they're much less comfortable about these things. Now, if you're a social conservative, you voted Leave in the referendum. If you're a social liberal, you voted for Remain. And because people were reflecting their views about Brexit in whether they were swinging to or from the Conservatives and whether or not they were likely to go to Labour, therefore that distinction between social conservatives and social liberals became much more marked in whether or not people voted Conservative or Labour in June, whereas whether or not they were left-wing or right-wing, well, it still mattered, but it didn't matter any more than it had done historically. Right. So the movement in 2017 is primarily explained by whether you're a social conservative or a social liberal, not whether you're left-wing or right-wing.
Well, let me put that to Matthew Paris, because for you, the whole EU referendum was extremely important. Would you say that that was more important than your traditional left-right politics now?
Yes. I've gone slightly mad over Brexit.
Well, you're in good company.
A lot of people have. I dream about it. I think about it all the time. And I've found myself now feeling I could much more easily be friends with someone in the Labour Party that was against Brexit than with someone in the Conservative Party that was in favour of it.
So have you thought about voting Labour?
We're possessed. No, I have thought about it, yes, but with Jeremy Corbyn as leader, no. And that brings us back to the topic you introduced at the beginning. I think Labour have, with great success, mined the possibilities of attracting support from the extreme, from the left. And I think the Tories have, with great success, mined the support that all the support they can get from the right.
Except they both dominated the results, so they must have also been taking from in between.
And in order for one to gain a decisive advantage over the other, it must be to the centre that they must now look for their new support.
Right. I mean, listening to Matthew Paris there, John, do you think that this is a bubble, that this is a temporary state of affairs in terms of the way people are voting and their allegiances to social liberals and social conservatives, or do you think this is going to be sustained, it's going to endure?
Well, I mean, given that it's likely we're going to be talking about Brexit this time next year and probably this time the year after that, the stimulus that seems to have brought this about, which was the EU referendum, is frankly still likely to be with us. I think for so long as we're arguing about Brexit, we are going to see this distinction between social liberals and social conservatives mattering, and it frankly creates difficulties for both our political parties. Matthew is not alone, because bear in mind the Conservative Party, it now has a very strong, very much a pro-Leave electorate, an electorate whose views of running the economy is primarily protectionist and very much at odds with those of what you might regard the traditional centre-right Conservative voter who runs a business. They are, as you can now see, their views about how the economy should be run are very much at odds with those of the Conservative Party. Meanwhile, the Labour Party, it has a tension because in winning over Remain voters, it's won over a lot of young graduates and it's won that community much more successfully than it has working class voters, but it's working class voters who the Labour Party still think they should be representing. So both parties have electorates as a result of this process, which is at odds with our traditional conception and the party's own traditional conception of where their core support lies.
Right. Do you think the parties will change their offer to bridge the divide that they are now being faced with within their own political tribe? Or will they just stick to the vaguely traditional offer that both these parties make to those two sets of people in the hope that once we get through the Brexit negotiations, normal business will resume?
Well, I think certainly for the next 12 months, it's frankly going to be difficult for the parties to avoid Brexit and therefore the social conservative versus social liberal issue, because we're now reaching the point in the Brexit negotiations where the hard choices are going to have to be made and where what Brexit actually does mean is going to become more apparent. And for example, if in the end the Conservative government actually does not secure exit from freedom of movement or something that looks like it, it's probably going to be in very considerable electoral trouble because that's what its electorate expects. Meanwhile, if the Labour Party ends up looking too hard on Brexit, it potentially will put at risk the substantial votes of graduates and young voters that it has gained. So I think over these next 12 months in particular, because Brexit is likely to be the central issue and where the shape of Brexit will become obvious, it's going to be difficult for the parties to triangulate across these various divides,
All right.
but rather they're going to have to take a position.
John Curtis, thank you very much.